Welcome, everyone, to those that are joining us. We'll begin in a minute or so's time. Welcome, everyone. I can see more people are joining, and we'll give it in 30 seconds just to allow those joining to log in. Kathy, good to see you.
Likewise, Jason, it's our first webinar for the year, so I'm very excited.
It is. I can't believe we're still in January, to be honest, but there we go.
Yeah, almost done though.
Almost done. Almost done. Well, let's have a look. We're up to 40 and people are still joining. So we're 1 minute over. Let's kick off. We've got a lot to fill in today and go through. So welcome everybody and joining us today for our Future Skills 2027, where we'll be showcasing some of the reports and things that we've been looking at for the coming year and years as you start to plan out your L&D strategies over the next few years and weeks. Um, just want to do a quick sound check for everyone. Everyone can hear me okay. We have got the chat, so please do use the chat today in your response. Just want to make sure that you can all hear me okay. A thumbs up, any emojis, or use the chat just to give me some feedback. Brilliant, thank you. I can see some there, and also that you can see my screen okay that we're sharing. Thank you all. Some more thumbs up. That's really good. And that we're here to learn. Again, please give me a thumbs up. This is all about you today. So although Gyati and I will be taking you through some of the key trends that we've been seeing, telling a few stories to bring those to life today, this really is about you. So if you've got comments, reflections, we will engage the audience as much as possible to hear some of your thoughts. We've got a lot of experts in the room, so it'll be great to hear insights from you as well. Um, Bit about what we'll go through today as part of the agenda. So we have got 60 minutes to pack a lot in today. And so as part of this, we will be giving a little bit of an introduction to Nullscape. I know there's a few of you on the call today that are aware of us or familiar with us from either being clients or engaging with us in other areas. But we're going to give a quick snapshot of who Nullscape are and why we do what we do. We're then going to go through our report, and Kiarti's kindly going to take us through some of that and some of the key trends that are coming out of that, and also talk about some of the future of work and skills. What are we seeing coming up on the horizons that we need to be thinking about as learning and development and performance professionals inside organizations? And then we'll be talking about what does that mean in terms of transforming our roles as part of that. And although we've got some Q&A at the end, if questions come up, we have got people monitoring the chat, so please do put them in there and we'll capture those as we go along as well. So first and foremost, a little bit about who you've got in front of you. I'm Jason. I head up the growth here at Nullscape across the UK, Europe, and America regions. I've been in learning and development now for the past 15 years, and that really is where my hat lies. I love the learning, development, and performance space, and very passionate about it. So really looking forward to delving into today. And I've got Kiati with me, who's I would describe as our expert. Kiati, welcome. Great to have you with me today.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, so we are quizzers at Nullscape for those that have experienced this. We're going to start off and make sure the chat's all working. So I just want to make sure you can see this in front. So to experience is to learn. Everything else is just information. Who can tell me who wrote that quote? Please put in the chat any answers. We can give you some magical points this end for those that get it right. But let's just see. Any guesses?
It's okay if you're wrong. It's not an exam.
There's no tests. Okay, we've got one. Deep Seek, no.
No,
Any
this
other
wasn't
guesses?
AI generated.
Wish it was me. Yep, Lorena, it's one of my favorites. I wish it was me also. And there was a much brighter mind than myself. Cynic, no. Good guess though, Lizzie. Einstein, nicely done, Roxana. Einstein was the person that wrote this. And why it's so pertinent today is because this really sits as a foundational piece to Nullscape's belief system as we think about learning and the learning environment. To experience is to learn, everything else is just information. There is a lot of content out there right now. We live in a world where the digital AI age is really creating and making it very easy to create content. And as part of that, distinguishing what's important and where we really start to shift into doing things differently through those new mindsets and skill sets is really by doing. And we believe that, a lot of the learning that we have through life happens by doing. So that would be a key theme that you'll see through today. But a little bit about Nullscape. So we are the world's largest experiential learning technology company. You'll see that throughout. A lot of what we do is quite immersive in nature in terms of our approach to learning. We operate across five direct offices. So you can see here, I reside in the UK, Kati in Bangalore in India. And I know we've got a number of you from different organizations and countries across the globe. We service those countries through our partners. So we've got over 500 plus coaches and facilitators and partners that really help us deliver globally for organizations as well. Alongside that, we do have the fortune of working with lots of different organizations. You can see some of the brands there, but it can really vary in terms of size, industry, and we really leverage that in terms of some of the data that we get and being able to learn from that data in those different organizations, some of the key themes that are coming out as part of that. And we're very proud to say that we've been impacting over 500,000 in our immersive approaches and simulations as part of that across the globe. So I'm going to also talk a little bit about what does the anatomy of future-ready organizations look like. Now, there are really two key parts to this. One area that we've really found from our experience is looking at core skills. So thinking about what leadership readiness now means, we have got a generation of baby boomers that are exiting the organization in quite senior roles and having to fill those spots and having a great talent pipeline. So that's one aspect that we believe make future-ready organizations. The other is digital readiness. No longer can we just be great at certain traditional leadership capabilities and skills. We've got to understand the digital landscape that we now operate in. Are we able to adapt to the levels of data that we're now receiving as part of that, interpret that data effectively and make good decisions with that data? So having a digital lens on this, and you'll see that come out of the report. I'm sure as Gareth and I take you through it, you'll see some of that. The other is culture readiness, especially from the pandemic, following the pandemic. We've seen a lot of organizations really focus on this as a priority for future readiness. The reason being is, we live in a hybrid working world now, and we hear that a lot. It's still there. It's very dynamic. And so we haven't always got the same friction or rub of bumping into people in the office or seeing where values and behaviors are delivered so well or exhibited so well and not so well as part of that. And so creating an environment where we can build culture readiness has become really important. The other area, if you like, or pillar is around contextual skills. A big part is around organizational readiness. Are we truly aligned to the results that we want to get as part of that? Do we have the industry readiness? We're seeing within this digital age, industries are really starting to blur. And alongside that, roles are really starting to blur as well. And so thinking about our role readiness, what does that mean to be future ready as an individual and in our roles is become really important. And we do that in a way which is, as I mentioned with the quote with Einstein, through something that's very immersive. We bring in experiential learning as a key emphasis of that. And we do that with the ability to do it at scale through our digital simulations and platform. You can see here some of these can be customized and made into your own organization needs, and others we have a large portfolio of different simulations that support those core skills as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to Kiarthi now just to talk a bit about the report that we've done and share with you some of the highlights that we can learn from that.
Thank you, Jason. And I mean, really, it is a jungle out there, with all the technical advancements that are happening. And we at Nordscape, we're very data driven. So we were very curious in the last year to really understand what's going on with L&D. And just outside of, the 400 plus organizations that we work with, we were curious to understand what people are doing. So we went out, we designed this very comprehensive survey and surveyed close to 120 respondents. These were L&D managers, HR managers, HR VPs, all the way to CXOs working in the people and culture function across the world, except for, I think, the North and the South Pole. We covered all continents and countries across all of them and 7+ industries. So we've got everything from healthcare, IT, consulting, right, the works. And for everyone that's tuned in today, they are going to get access to the report. We haven't released this publicly, so we're very excited about that. And as we start, I think the first thing I wanted to do was really highlight what are the key findings that the report outlined, right? It's a very comprehensive report. We've got about 100+ pages of insights, but we've only got an hour, so we're going to keep it short. And I don't think we can do any webinar when we speak about the future or any conversation when we speak about the future without touching upon AI. So that was one theme that really stood out to us, right? And organizations, particularly the large ones with 5,000+ employees, are really feeling the pressure, right, of how to use AI and what to do with it. And Jason, I want to understand from you as well. I think you speak to clients day in and day out. What are your thoughts on what's happening with AI, the pressure, the anxiety, the excitement?
Yeah, it can feel a bit of a minefield, kind of, I think, as you described there. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's moved along from a buzzword now. I think it's here to stay as much as either you love or loathe it. I think we've got to embrace it, and we're certainly seeing those organizations and learning and development teams that are leveraging AI effectively starting to really push on as part of that. I think it was interesting, I attended an event the other day and the question came up. There was a thought leader there talking about AI and how it's used in learning and development and performance. And there was a little bit of an awkward silence when they talked about, how are you using it? And I think some of the things that we found is organizations or learning development teams are using it from a content development perspective, maybe, but not necessarily leveraging it from the conversations that we had at the table, in service of thinking about personalization and how you can create real personalized experiences for individuals within their learning and so on and so forth. So that's something that I've certainly come across.
That's very interesting because there's so many use cases, right? There's automation, there's data collection, there's analytics. So we've really just scratched the surface when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
And I mean, the next point also kind of speaks about industry specific skills for development and upskilling. So we're seeing, that one size fits all approach with e-learning or with traditional learning models is kind of, it's going away, or it's not a preference anymore. And people are, and you mentioned personalization, I think they're looking for it, and AI gives us the opportunity to do that quite well, actually. What are you seeing on the ground when you look at personalization or looking for very specific types of trainings?
Yeah, I think it goes to what we were just mentioned around the readiness for the future. I think a lot of organizations, certainly that I'm speaking with, have been talking about honing in on those roles and actually how do we build, even pipeline of roles coming in now. And those roles and industries are changing so rapidly as part of that. Again, the blurredness is creating that sort of dynamic, I think, So there's definitely a focus I'm seeing out there.
And you mentioned pipeline, and that ties in beautifully to the next point that we have, which is leadership development. And the reason pipeline becomes important to discuss here is because the report also found that um, leadership development is the largest focus for a lot of the companies out there, but they're actually spending a lot of their funds on early career professionals and mid-career professionals for leadership. It's kind of flipped. And they're not spending as much on training their leadership on leadership, right? And I can't help but wonder if that's because of building pipeline for leadership. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wonder if it's that. Another part of me is also thinking about organizations are becoming a lot flatter now as well, and so the level of decisions is going further down into sort of the front line, so to speak. As part of
Yeah.
that, I think when people are coming into organizations, there's almost an expectation now that people will share their voice and lean into what we're doing. So I think there's an element of that as well, I think.
I hear you. And I mean, before we move to the last one, Jason, I do want to hear from the crowd. And you mentioned on one of our previous slides about the multi-gen workforce and four generations being together in the workplace. And we're seeing it with a lot of our clients. In fact, we see it at work as well, right? We've got um, leadership at Nordscape that have 20, 30 years of work experience, and then you've got people that have just finished college and they've just joined the organization. So we do have a quick poll around understanding what our audience is doing about the multi-generational workforce, right? If you have any best case practices on this, we'd love to hear from you. And then I think we'll show you what we found.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm just popped up now, so hopefully you should all see that.
Yeah,
We'll give a moment for people to answer.
absolutely. It's a multiple choice, yeah. So if you like more than one answer, uh, you can choose that.
I was just trying to vote myself, but it says unfortunately hosts and
It's not
panelists.
allowing me.
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
All right, I think we should be good.
I
Should we
like
close
that. So
it?
some people in the chat are also saying it's definitely in all of the above. So yeah, it's not a
Mhm.
singular thing. We're using multiple things.
Yeah, I think we can close the poll.
Yeah, let's close. Let's see some of the results.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So even though all four are important, we're seeing a focus on reverse mentoring and cross-generational learning and
Yeah.
cross-functional age diverse teams for innovation. That's very interesting. Hard one to pull off though, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting to see AI-driven personalized training still doesn't quite,
Mm.
again, I think that was reflective in the conversation and the event that I was in. It's still early days where that's coming in for L&D.
Yeah, and just on reverse mentoring, I think I was speaking to someone in one of the big four consulting firms, and they have a very robust program, and it has many benefits. So you have a lot of Gen X learning Gen Z lingo and then going into meetings, and they're able to
Yeah.
relate to the team members, and not just that, I think you're also really inspiring the younger people in the team to take up responsibility and again, ties into leadership development. So I think it builds that pipeline really well. So I think
Yeah.
that works beautifully.
Yeah, a big conversation at the moment around multi-generational workforce. I've been seeing a lot, Kathy, is around also the mental well-being space and
Mm,
about
yeah.
well-being at work. I think not always, but I'm thinking of a specific client that we've been supporting at the moment around um, thinking about how we equip their managers and leaders to deal with people that are more open, with their emotions now, their feelings. I've got more to say. It's not just in a box. This is what you've got to do. They're really bringing themselves. And I think how do we leverage that as part of our multi-generational workforces? It's been a key one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we process the world very differently
Yeah.
every 10 years almost. But moving on, I think I also want to discuss some of the global trends we found within the reports, looking at the subjects, the skills that professionals really want to develop, how they're using AI, what kind of workforce transformation partners they're looking for in this year. So really deep dive as much as we can. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the kind of skills that are really important or are really the need of the hour when we're looking at transforming the L&D function or really have the L&D function support different organizations. And it's no surprise to me that leadership skills is right on top with digital skills, just trailing right behind. What are your thoughts on this, Jason? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think the emphasis on leadership is now really high. I remember, again, post-pandemic or during the pandemic period, which was a big change, obviously, that we all went through. And that, people saying, or L&D leaders saying, what does that mean for leadership? And of course, at that time, no one knew that it was a time that we'd never lived in and been in before. But I think what we've certainly seen is that there is an emphasis around the intentionality of great leadership as part of that. So thinking about things like emotional intelligence now and empathy and how we shape the vision, our communication as leaders has become really important. So I think there's an and that's now been added to that, which is the digital skills element, which is
Mhm.
now no longer a nice to have. It's part of a key imperative for leadership, as having a level of psychological safety and inclusion is for organizations now as a focus. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think that's certainly what's coming out here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you don't necessarily need how to write code, right? That's not the requirement, but it's so important to understand the technology and how you use it and how your customer would use it, and really be able to innovate irrespective of where you are within your life cycle. And you notice that here as well with top rank skills, data literacy and data analytics really comes out on top when we look at digital skills, right? Followed by strategic thinking and data-driven decision making. And then the mid and you know what's also interesting is within the report we kind of noticed that DEI has been such a large topic, has been a topic of discussion around the world, and it's kind of losing steam, and we're realizing that L&D professionals don't necessarily want to invest or spend too much time on that. But yeah, I do want to understand, do you resonate with this report? Do you think it aligns with the kind of conversations you're having with your clients?
Yeah, and I would love to hear from the audience actually. Please, you do put in the chat. I'm curious around this. What are some of the leadership skills and digital skills you're seeing coming up? I actually expected design thinking innovation to be a lot higher, especially with the changes that are going on. I thought that would be a lot higher. But yeah, would love to hear in the chat. Please use it so that we can bring some of that out. Um, So Aurelio's put, as a DEI professional, it's not about moving away from it, but focusing on inclusive leadership, belonging, and ensuring every voice is heard. Do you know what? I think that's a big thing. I think
Yeah.
one of the big things now is I think having it as a separate topic started the conversation that's important. So I
Hmm.
think now it's becoming important as leadership. You've got to have that if you are truly operating in the leadership space. So Aurelia, I think I completely agree with what you've shared there.
I think Lizzie says the same thing. It's about
Yeah,
we're at a stage where I think we need to integrate DEI into our culture, and just how people function within the organization. It's not a standalone anymore. And
yeah.
you'll notice resilience has shown up twice. That was interesting. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, resilience and change is coming up a lot. I think uh, you know, I almost draw back on some of the buzzwords out there and that you hear around lots of change, but it is it's accelerating, it's fast. AI is having an effect on that, and so is digital. So I think that level of change is really important. I think especially for generations that are coming into the workplace as well and thinking, where is my role and purpose now as part of that? And leaders are thinking that, what does that mean for my role? It's going to start to shift. We know there's going to be new jobs that are created out of that, and some will become a little bit more redundant, as you've seen with, through history with the industrial age and moving on from farming and so forth. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. Agility and flexibility is a big one that's coming up as well, and also psychological safety and strategic thinking. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Right. Um, we have another poll now, and this one is something that we want to understand from you how you look at business metrics and how you link your L&D initiatives to business metrics, and it's increasingly becoming the need of the hour when we speak to different organizations. And we're going to speak a little bit more about that and our take on it. Again, given how data-driven we are and how much we really like to quantify everything. I think we'd like to hear from the audience what they're doing.
Yeah, let's see. I think this came out in the report, right? Quite high in terms of
It
uh,
did.
an importance for learning and development and performance. And I like the
Yeah.
phrase actually I heard. I'm using performance quite a lot now, where we're
Mhm.
actually in learning and performance, not just learning and development. We're there to increase the level of performance or impact on our organization. So I quite like that sort of. I know it's only a word, but it does give a bit of a shift in terms of what.
Yeah,
So it's interesting. Let's see what comes out of the poll.
I like that. I think even when we pitch to our clients, it should be learning and performance and not learning and development.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. L&P.
Yeah, maybe it'll catch on. Who's seeing the LMP?
All
So
right, let's give it 10 more seconds.
yeah, 50% answered at the moment.
I know there's three questions. It takes a little
There
bit
is three
longer.
questions, but it's taken a little bit longer. Let's see what we've got.
I'll move to the next slide though, just so we can be quick.
Okay.
Okay, we're ending it. Let's look at the results.
This is interesting. Okay.
Okay, so I'm noticing there's a with all three results, you'll see that the middle option is the most subscribed one. What's good to see is the last one, where
Mm.
we're saying, okay, I need more clarity on the business KPIs. We don't track the data. L&D is not linked to performance. That's not subscribed as much. So that's comforting to see. I think everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I'd love to, for those of you that have maybe put very well and can clearly map L&D impact and KPI, would love, and I'm sure others would as well. This is,
Hmm.
a place where we can share that. Would love to hear what you're doing, some of the things that you found working really well, any pitfalls that you'd say watch out for, it's part of that. But it is interesting. I think this is a space that we're still seeing where it's difficult, right? It's very challenging to connect our L&D initiatives and impact KPIs as part of that.
Hmm. And I think that the report outlines that as well, right? We're moving away from um, L&D or learning just being a tick box where I'm calling people in because I need to train them or I need to exhaust my funds. And it is really moving to having to show ROI on that and having to show how the business is impacted by it, right? It could be anything from customer satisfaction, increased revenue, increased savings in times of austerity. So I think there's different use cases for it, and the report clearly outlined that that is a focus and a priority. And Jason, you mentioned, and I mean, we know this, you've been working in this space for a long time. Um, do you think that this is a discussion that started recently, or do you think that this is an age-old issue that learning professionals face in the workplace when it comes to measuring impact or aligning to business KPIs?
I think this is a perennial problem, or not problem, but it's been there. The conversation's always been,
Hmm.
certainly. I think what's happened now is if you look at again tracking back through some of the history and what we've been doing, I think there is more learning development, HR professionals, people professionals that are now sitting at the top table have earned the right to be there, and I think rightly so in terms of what we're doing. I think the business as well, more and more now are saying, in the past it used to be if there was a level of change or economic crisis, the first to go, we've all been there, right? Was learning development or branding as part of that. And I think what we found from the data is actually those organizations that have really doubled down during those times on learning development, supporting their people through that and building those skills, have actually their productivity and their retention of talent has hugely increased. So I think business leaders now are far more aware of that. but rightly so, they're also asking, so what does this mean? This is all brilliant what we're doing. How's it impacting my business? As
Yeah.
part of that. And I think so that question and closing that gap is I guess come to the top a lot more.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I think in the next few minutes we also want to share with everyone that's tuned in how they can do this. So how we like to do this for our partners. But I'm going to move on and I'm going to come back and circle back to AI, right? There's, of course, data and analytics and kind of measuring outcomes has become easier because we have AI, we have this technology that helps us do this. And I think someone in the chat also mentioned that they recently placed a data insights person in their L&D group, and that's kind of made it easier. And even internally, we collect a lot of data using AI. But there still is anxiety and coupled with excitement, and there's people that are concerned about what this technology would mean for us. So I'm interested to hear, Jason, what are you picking up on? What are the undercurrents on using AI for learning that you see?
I think it's no surprise that this has come out quite high on the report. I think it's one of those ones that could have been a little bit predicted in terms of being on people's radars. I think it also depends on regional and global aspects as well. I'm certainly finding, operating in UK, Europe, and US, but also having colleagues that are operating in India or APAC regions as part of that. There is definitely a different split when you look at the global data as part of this. I think privacy and data security and regulations in Europe, obviously that's going to be a lot more heightened. I think if you look at that. But I also think that we shouldn't be using that as a barrier. This is again speaking to a client the other day. We're talking about, our business is saying that they don't want to go anywhere near AI, and I think that's more of a dangerous space to be in than thinking about ways in which we can sort of adopt it, but also having that real rigor in ethical considerations and data privacy as part of that. And Kathy, I don't know, what are you seeing? You work closely with the product team as well on this. What are you seeing?
I agree with you, Jason. I think saying no AI or not entertaining the idea is the wrong precedent for the company and the culture in totality. But then
Mm.
all the concerns that the report found were also really valid. But then in the last year, when we started really getting into how we want to use AI within our solutions, we actually built really robust systems on how we look at privacy and data security. Of course, these are aligned to the GDPR and the ISO compliance frameworks. And we don't prescribe using AI as a substitute for high touch training that's led by a person or or the intervention has some modalities that are led by a trainer. And we've got a lot of systems that we have in place where we test the content and we look at what kind of answers would come in and whether that makes sense for the audience that we're working with, to make sure that there's no bias. So there's a lot of work that goes into deploying a solution before we actually do it. And it's important for, I think, organizations to consider that when they're looking at partners that they work with, or if they're building solutions internally as well, to make sure that they found ways that they can do this, because we're seeing that of course, it takes a little bit longer, but it is possible. And we've seen great success with a few of our AI-driven solutions.
I love what Aurelia's just put in the chat, actually, that they work very closely with responsible AI councils and a framework within their organization. That's definitely something that I've come across, is bringing those in early into the conversation,
Yeah.
especially when you're thinking about your solutions as part of that. And I also think there's an element of um, as you think about this, not going just for the shiny objects. There are a lot of shiny objects, especially around AI. I mean, we're heading to the world of learning next week, and I remember, going last time. There's everything's AI now. It's like we're trying to integrate into everything. I think just being mindful of what are we using it for, what's the end result that we're trying to drive towards that, and then going through the rigor, like Aurelie's talking about there in the chat. Really starting to bring the right people in to make sure there's enough rigor around some of
Mhm.
the compliance things and ethical standards.
And I love the last line, right? The human is the superhero and the AI is the cape. I think that's
Yeah, I
such
love
a
that. Feeling
beautiful,
that.
yeah, it's a good analogy. But yeah, I think we're 25. We have 25 minutes left, so I'm gonna run through this very quickly. There are challenges as well, I think. When we speak about it, we get really optimistic. But every role comes with constraints, and the first one being budgets. We do want to do the best by our learners and bring in the best solution, but there's only limited resources and time. So I think it's really important to look at what kind of AI solutions or tech solutions you're looking at, or scalable solutions that you're looking at, and ensuring that you can kind of integrate them within your technical systems as well with a lot of ease. You don't want to spend too much time and effort on that, and make sure that you don't have a fragmented L&D ecosystem. I think collecting data and analytics on that becomes really, really hard. So you do end up spending a lot more.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the last two are really the no-brainers as well. You want to make sure that your learners engage, because we're spending a lot of time on social media and there's a lot of content being thrown at us day in and day out. So how am I really engaging my learner? Can I make it interesting? Can I make it gamified, right? Can I use real-world scenarios and really personalize it to make sure that their motivation's up as well? And lastly, I think what a lot of professionals end up doing is they want to do all of it themselves. But sometimes it's okay to take a step back and say, I can't do this. I don't have the budgets or the time or the people to do this. So I'm going to outsource a part of this to somebody who's really an expert at this. And as long as that fits into your budget, integrates with your technology, and provides learner engagement, I would really say if you're a smaller organization or you're a small department within a larger organization, it's okay to seek out partners that will help you do this well.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jason, that you want to add to the challenges?
Again, I'd just like to say if you've got any thoughts, I would love to hear about your challenges in the chat again and some of the things that you're doing to overcome it. I think from the conversations I've had, again, budget allocation's always a big one. I think it's always there, it never goes away. I think that's where attaching it and really knowing your business and the metrics that you're looking to drive really shift the conversation from just budget conversations into impact conversations. And that can be very different when you're going back to your business leaders seeking budgets or seeking funding for certain projects to have a real rigor in the business case and what it's going to impact. I think it's really important. And I think learner engagement, we've seen this. I mean, this was part of I guess my own personal mission around learning engagement, which is a lot of traditional learning. I think I've got to be careful saying this, but it's failed us a little bit in the past. I mean, it's still very much learning by listening or very passive in nature. Again, there's lots of content, and I think that has its place, right? That's really important to have that. But I think how, as you talked about there, Kathy, how are we adding context into that? Because that's where we really get the learning connecting with the context.
Mhm.
People can close that gap between being aware or knowing something and actually applying it day to day in their roles and what they do. I think it's become really important now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do want to spend a little bit of time discussing, if the audience were to engage with an L&D partner, what they should look for. And we did ask our respondents within the survey as well, what this would mean for them, because we wanted to be the best partner that we could to our clients. And it's no surprise, honestly, that AI-based personalized learning parts kind of came up on top. It was
Yeah.
an request that we weren't seeing as much prior to 2024, but it really did take off. And I was quite happy to see gamification and experiential learning on top, because that's what we live by.
Good
And
bias there, right?
yeah, but yeah, Jason, any thoughts? I mean, you've worked with traditional learning as well. Now you're on the other side with AI and experiential learning.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to the audience when they're looking at finding the right partner?
I really like the blended learning formats alongside it. I
Mhm.
think there's no right or wrong answer in all of this. I think it depends on the level of the context and the environment and the impact that you're trying to make inside your organization. I think the big part of this is how are you blending that together so it feels seamless for the end user and their experience around that. Does it meet what they need to make some of those shifts? So For me, I really like that the blended learning formats are in there. And I think having more of when you're speaking to um, partners and talking about these topics, I think having a broad perspective, not just a singular perspective on a certain area, having a broader perspectives where we can see how these all connect together is really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you have a partner that won't do away with a high touch approach or allows you to kind of deploy that at scale, but also gives you an AI-driven solution, something that's coaching with micro learning and all the others, I think that's the biggest win.
Brilliant.
But we didn't just want to talk about challenges, right? Or the report in itself and just throw data at people. We know that it's tough out there. So with this webinar, we also wanted to speak to everyone that signed in on what they can do to really future-proof learning within their organizations. And we have 5 phases that we really work around when we work with our clients. So Jason, I'd be very interested, to have you kind of walk everyone through this. And we won't just leave it at that, right? We want to also tell them or let them imagine what it would look like in their context. So in pursuit of that, what I've done is I've also added a couple of examples that we can speak about. So it really brings to life what, let's say, foundation and assessment or aligning L&D outcomes to business KPIs could look like for all our listeners. So I'm going to hand it over to you and have you walk everyone through phase one.
Thanks, Kathy. And I'd say so just for those of you that have joined today, we have put together a little pack, with some practical elements around some of the things that we've talked today. Of course, they're not the only answer. There's lots out there as well, so it'll just give you an aspect of that. But we want to share that, and you'll be given that after the session today, and have a chance to experience some of those, such as the immersive environment, so on and so forth, and the report itself. So you've got that. But this is really practical. So the first thing that we talked about, and we'll share this with you after the session, is how you conduct skills gap analysis as part of that. So thinking about the foundations and assessment, one of the things I'd always advocate, and we talk about, is how well are we doing that as, turning the mirror on ourselves, how well are we doing that in our own organization as learning professionals? I think sometimes we go out into the organization and forget to ask that question to ourselves. So I think that's something that certainly in my experience has been working really well. And how do we engage the right stakeholders and identify those needs and actually step into their world? Quite often we can see the gaps, in learning and development, or how our learning and development initiatives are going to impact the organization. But if we were to switch the lens into a business unit leader's lens or an operational leader, do they get it? And how do we start to talk some of their language as part of that? So I think that's the first piece that we will share as part of the foundation and assessment piece. As we go into the second phase, we'll also talk about how you align business metrics. So again, how do you start to tease out the right metrics that are important for the organization? And how do we connect learning and development metrics alongside those key KPIs and business metrics as well? So how do we become more data driven within that? And I know, Kathy, you've got as I throw these over to you with some of our clients, you've got some experience with some of these of how we start to do that and think about how we look at even behavioral analytics as well and how that's impacting the organization.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think I do want to jump into the example very quickly. And this was something that we started doing last year where a very large global organization, tech organization, they came to us and they said that one of their focuses as they were growing their business was to kind of double their headcount. And the challenge with that was how do you kind of maintain culture when you're hiring people so quickly, literally 2,000 people every quarter. That's huge. And they were struggling because they were seeing more attrition, even though they were hiring extensively. They were seeing challenges at work, and they kind of came to us and said, "Hey, we don't know what this is and why this is happening." And this is an organization that actually has a very mature learning function. But they were still kind of struggling. And we said, it's fine, let's look at what you're doing currently. So we did a baseline in terms of their initiatives, their onboarding right now. We looked at their business metrics. We said, okay, if you're going to double your headcount and culture is an important piece, how do we align to that? And we also told them they want to kind of train their managers, and they'd want to identify high potentials as they're hiring more people as well. So there's a lot of subsidiary outcomes that we were also looking at when we designed a self-paced course, because this had to be at scale. The
Mhm.
modality was self-paced, and we looked at two differentiated levels. So everyone at the leadership that's being hired, then everyone entry level and maybe mid-career that's being hired. And we were lucky to be able to roll this out at scale. It was an experiential learning solution. You can see the screenshots on the right side as well. We rolled it out to 10,000 users, and every user got a report in terms of how they were aligned to the company's culture and what they could do to align further. And they immediately saw a jump in terms of investment in work, right? The kind of outcomes they were seeing with their clients. And also just attrition dropped considerably, literally 6 months into the program. So now they've made it mandatory. Everybody does this when they join the organization, and then they go through a refresher every year as well. Right. So that is one way in which we worked around phase 1 and 2 for one of our key clients. I'm going to move
Nice.
on to phase 3.
Yeah, AI-driven personalization. So obviously this is another key pillar, and we again
Mhm.
in the piece that we'll share in terms of thinking about how you implement adaptive learning platforms as part of that. I think there are a lot of platforms out there, and it's constantly evolving. So making sure that it's a dynamic one that that can be plugged in to different areas, and it all talks together is becoming really important. And thinking about how are you leveraging AI at the moment, and how would you like it to be leveraged as part of that. And again, I know as we've talked about through the session today, a lot of how we use AI is predominantly within our in our simulations as part of that, capturing some of the data in terms of choices in those simulations and how people are applying learning in those environments. But Kathy, again, I know you've got some use cases where that's sort of brought to life a little bit more.
And this one is my favorite. It's a game changer. Honestly, we really stepped into the future with this one, even just at Nullscape. So we had a very large global consulting firm that came to us and said, hey, consulting is very difficult. It's high pressure job, high stakes. And from the time you join the industry, the room for margin for error is really, really small. Even as an associate or an analyst, one mistake can cost you the client, right? So there's a lot riding on your performance, whatever your role may be. And they realized that they weren't able to provide personalized learning within a certain framework to the different global employees that they were working with, or they were onboarding to become consultants. So they came to us, they said, hey, can you help us with an AI-driven personalized solution? Right, and that's kind of where our development of AI solutions also really picked up. And we designed this risk-free hands-on environment where the learner steps in and gets to practice client management skills and data analytics skills and communication skills, things that are very important as a consulting professional. And the interesting thing here, Jason, was that they weren't just speaking to a system, they were speaking to an AI avatar that mimicked the kind of clients that the consulting firm had, that mimicked their managers, their partners within those functions. And if you and I were to play the simulation, the conversation that the AI would have with us would be very different. So if I've given an answer and you've given an answer, we would get very personalized, specific, different feedback. So it's very contextual as well, right? In certain cases, we were able to branch this. So depending on your answer, then you're getting different questions with every next scenario that's coming up to test your skills in that context. And they went through this journey after going through online training. So we didn't do the simulation in isolation. It was part of a larger journey, but we ran the pilot late last year. It worked out, and we're scaling this globally for all the analysts that are looking to become associates in the next few years. So this one is a personal favorite for me.
Nice. And I guess the fourth element to this that we've got in our key sort of roadmap, if you like, to think about is building flexible blended learning solutions. Now, I know this has been there for ages. This is not new for people, so to speak. But one of the things we've been thinking about is how do you add, and as you described there, Kiarthi, how do you add real world
Mhm.
scenarios into that learning and move it to the level of experience within those blended approaches as part of it? I think how do you combine those modalities? And how do you do it in a way that you can scale as well? That seems to be the big thing that is coming out now. How do you have something that you can scale and using technology to be able to do that has become important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think how we're doing blended learning is also changing.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the last phase and the last part of today's webinar.
Yeah, a culture of continuous learning and adaptability. A continuous learning. I mean, there was a phrase. I think every call I used to go on with L&D leaders at one point was, "We're trying to create a culture of continuous learning." And I think as you looked at that and asked questions around it, everyone was in different phases of trying to create a learning environment that was continuous and also emphasizing the ownership more on the learner. So how you have a push and a pull approach is part of that. But I think the other big thing is about how do you have something after the learning interventions that someone can access in the moment. So if you think about learning and the educational part, you've got a practice element where you've got a place where a safe environment where people can apply that learning. But you also need something in the day to day, right? In the moment, we can't just wait for a coach or a peer or sometimes we need to ask those questions in the moment. So how do you leverage sort of AI and digital elements into that as well? And I know this is an exciting case study, and there's a few out there at the moment, but seems to be grabbing a lot of attraction for organizations.
Yeah, this one's an exciting one as well. And here you'll notice what happened, Jason, was we work with Dr. Raj, who's a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. We built a simulation around his model for happiness at work, which again is one of our best-selling solutions for well-being in the workplace. But he goes into these very high impact trainings with very large global organizations, sometimes even with the US government, for example, and does these trainings. And he came to us last year and he said, guys, I want the world to be a happier place. And people email me once the training's done and they say, can you help us? We have doubts, we have questions, we don't know who to go to. We don't feel like we can go to our peers, or we can go to the L&D function or HR to ask them. I don't feel comfortable, and it's fair, right? There's a certain level of safety required when you're asking certain questions, like, oh, I don't like my peer, or I feel like I'm being bullied, or how do I have that difficult conversation? So he said, if I could clone myself and give myself to everybody that goes through my trainings and my sessions, I think that would be best case. So we took his problem statement and we really worked on it. And a few weeks later, we had an AI coach that spoke just like Raj, was trained on his model, and gives very, very personalized support, almost as if you were speaking with Raj when you ask a doubt, right? So any questions around well-being and happiness for yourself, for your team members, for your peers, the coach kind of answers it. So it's we're starting to deploy this now. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out in the next year for Northscape and for our clients as well.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how this space is really moving as well, because I know from the conversations where we've been talking about using Dr. Raj, but it's expanded into organizations saying, well, we've got a level of experts internally
Yeah.
that we also need to clone and have people, be able to access and get that information. So again, it's starting to open up into that space where you have got sort of a personal mentor or coach on the go as part of that, but in a safe environment, that is
Mhm.
not open AI, so to speak, in terms of the open internet, but
Mhm.
actually still thinking in a safe environment of our own knowledge, the knowledge that's important, and the insights that are important for us as an organization. So yeah, cool
Yeah.
story. I'm interested to see how it evolves.
Yeah, exciting times. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our webinar. We're very quickly going to move to Q&A in case you have any questions for us, any doubts. And before we do that, I do want to give people the chance to download the report. So we have the QR code. If you scan this, You will be taken to a link where you can download the whole report, go through it. It's a very interesting read. I kind of spent a bunch of time in the last few weeks looking at it. And if you don't download it today, that's fine. We will also send you a link. And outside of that, I think I would also implore everyone on the call to kind of think about where you are with your L&D initiatives for the year or for the next 2 years. And if you have any challenges, any questions, any doubts around how do I do this? How do I really work around this problem? Please feel free to reach out to us. I know Jason's been working in the space for a while, and I've been on a lot of client calls with him. He's a good person to kind of thought partner with, and I think we'd be happy to help you reimagine or imagine what L&D looks like for you.
Thanks, Kat. And we've got some messages around the slides as well, and can we share those? And a question from Alistair. So, do you think AI will replace human coaches? I've got a personal opinion on this, Kathy, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I don't think so. I think it's going to supplement human coaches because we're not doing away, like even with Raj, we're not doing away with his sessions. We're bringing in his coach to kind of supplement learning after a certain point.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a replacement. I think it's an addition. So I think one of our listeners also said it's like a cape. It kind of adds to your power, and that's how I see it.
I completely agree with you. I do think it's the cape. I'm going to steal that, a cape to the
Yeah.
superhuman out there. I think although I mean, even the Dr. Raj one, someone said the other day, that felt more empathetic in the response than maybe some of our leaders would share
Mhm.
as part of that. But I still don't believe it will necessarily replace, sitting down, face to face, with a coffee or a cup of tea and having a proper coaching conversation with that. I think it will fuel a lot of those conversations, and it will give people the chance to be able to access a level of coaching at scale in the moment, which we've never been able to do before, right? We've had to either spend a lot on coaches across the organization, but I also think we can start to be really specific in terms of some of the coaching elements that we're doing.
I agree. And Gigi has a very interesting question for us, where he
Okay.
says, how do you adopt AI coaches for different cultures? Because we process information and communicate very differently. Very valid question. I think it's something that we debate internally as well.
Yeah.
Um, and Jason, this is interesting because when we were looking at doing contextual analysis for video and audio,
Mm.
our clients did come back and say, hey, how aggressive a culture would be in communicating their point would be very different from another one. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how we speak or how that language kind of plays out. Like our facial expressions when we're communicating excitement and sadness, that differs as well. So we have kind of been working internally to see how we can incorporate that as best as we can with the technology that's available or the advancement that's been done right now. But I think it's early days, and I think we have a very long way to go when we look at hyper personalization across geographies or cultures or even communities within a country.
Yeah, I think even if you look at some of the large language models that are out there
Mhm.
within AI, there's clearly an advancement, or it's slightly further ahead when you look at English and
Yeah.
that that approach. I think it's interesting. Another organization where we're talking about this very topic. It's a great topic. Where even as we're thinking about coaching around well-being, for instance, and thinking about leadership, and actually in some regions, there's certain things you just wouldn't be able to say or talk about as you would do in another region. And so I think making sure that you've got those cultural nuances within that AI and thinking about that is becoming really important. Again, another one was talking around the HR policies. If we can have an expert like a Raj, but for our HR policies and how to raise certain things. Again, I think you have to build that data, and I wouldn't rush to do it. I'd build it slowly so
Mhm.
you're taking into consideration those cultural, regional nuances as part of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even Raj's model, just as we use it and keep testing it, it kind of evolves. So the kind of answers we're getting, it's becoming more empathetic, it's becoming more nuanced
Yeah,
with every passing day. So I think it's a work in progress. We're not there yet.
yeah,
Um,
I
I
agree.
think Michelle thanks us for the session today. Michelle, thank you for being an amazing audience. We were so excited to host this for you, and we're glad you could be here.
Yeah, and I know we're coming up to the final 2 minutes. If there's any other questions that you want to input into the chat or you want to send to us separately, please do. As I mentioned, there will be a bit of a pack for those that have joined us today, so we'll share that with you. And there's a chance to, again, immerse yourself and see some of the AI elements or things that we're seeing in the report, how you can use those in action. So we'll share that with you. But thanks to Kiarthi, thanks for your input and conducting this report and sharing some of the findings. I certainly found it interesting, and it's great to see the audience did as well. So great to be with you all.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you everyone for joining in. I think we'll sign off in just a minute. I'm glad everyone could make it today. We do have, in case you missed certain parts of the webinar, we do have a very similar one at another time coming up in the next 10 days. It's for the Asian time zones. But if you can't join it, we'd be happy to host you. And we do these sessions once every 2 months. So we will be looking at hosting you for the subsequent ones as well.
There we go. Arch has put in the chat February 11th. So if you are looking at that date, February 11th is the one that you can join for that. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll sign off there, but great to be with you. And we look forward to many of you being on the next one as well. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.